Welcome to the AAAi Podcast. I'm Bridget McCormack, the CEO and president of the American Arbitration Association.
And I'm Zach Abramowitz, founder of Killer Whale Strategies and investor in disruptive legal startups. The AAAi Podcast tells the story of the American Arbitration Association's AI journey. We discuss emerging trends in artificial intelligence with movers and shakers inside AAA, as well as with key influencers in the broader legal AI ecosystem.
So, Bridget, this is our third legal tech in a row recording podcasts right here in New York with the at the conference. This is the third year in a row that you've presented at this conference, and yet this year feels very different to me from 3 years ago, and feels very much like where we thought like this might head, but with some surprises, but just an incredibly exciting time. But I wanted to start before we kind of get into like big picture takeaways about Legalweek with the panel that you hosted, and really some like very serious heavy hitters on this panel, which was standing room only. I was there. Many people I saw taking notes. Talk to us a little bit about who was on this panel and the topic.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great panel. It was on governance, but more specifically on how AI governance and legal oversight is critical to AI adoption. Like, it turns out governance is actually a piece of the formula for success in integrating AI into your business. And nobody knows what they're doing with it because it just requires some new governance muscles. Like, for example, the governance has to be living, because as quickly as the technology is changing, the governance also has to change. So actually, the Legalweek organizers asked if we had any expertise in that. And in fact, at the AAA, we have a lot of expertise in it,
right?
Because we've been, we're 3 years into building AI across our operations and products with AI, each of which requires like slightly different governance. But as a result, we have a pretty sophisticated governance approach that we're kind of proud of. And we've done some like talking about and giving free advice to other businesses that are trying to figure this out. And so when the Legalweek organizer said, "Do you guys know anything about governance?" We were like, "In fact, we know quite a bit." We even have this like survey in the field now. We can talk about that in a future episode when we get the results back. So I had a great panel. I had Henry Hagan, who's in-house at Moderna. And Moderna, as you know, was one of these like very early company-wide adopters of AI, OpenAI's products in particular. And the CEO at Moderna had the legal team lead adoption. So they had to go first, right? I think super smart. But and then Galia Amran who's in-house at OpenAI. And Galia and I have we've ended up on, panels together in places about AI, like across the world, including most recently Tel Aviv, not on a panel together, but we were both speaking at the same conference in Tel Aviv. And Galia focuses on safety in her role in-house at OpenAI. And then Anna Gressel, who's, I think, a really impressive, forward-thinking leader on governance. She's a partner at Freshfields. She's their AI global head of AI, whatever that means. But she's advising all kinds of enterprises about AI governance. So she kind of has experience across the enterprise spectrum with where businesses are succeeding, where they're not. And she's super thoughtful, I think, about the topic. And it ended up being a fantastic combination of perspectives on a topic everyone's thinking about and worried about.
Yeah, and sometimes at conferences, a panel is sort of something you do because you brought everyone together, so there's got to be some content. But really, the most important part of the conference is just kind of the getting the people together.
Yeah, the in-betweens.
I actually thought this was, and I you can check me. I haven't said this about the presentations in the past. Not that those weren't, but this one felt to me incredibly meaningful. And I would say that Anna, in particular, her role, the very fact that she's doing what she's doing in terms of advising companies on their AI rollout, and it just felt to me like a data point in its own right.
Yeah,
that there is a partner at Freshfields, who is the co-head of AI, who's not just working on like making sure that our lawyers use
internally.
AI, which is how it always feels like it's positioned.
Yeah.
But she's actually taking an active role. And I thought also brought a perspective that was not the kind of we're going to be so careful to the point of non-adoption,
right?
Which is something that you and I spoke about 3 years ago about like cutting red tape and making sure that like the path to adoption was not held up by endless committees, by cumbersome policies,
task forces.
And so I thought that was just like just on its own, like such an interesting, like her role, the fact that that exists to me again, such an interesting data point. You've had like 24 hours now to digest, and I know obviously you planned the panel in advance, but what are your top, 2 or 3 takeaways following this panel?
Yeah, I mean, one was that the theory of the panel turned out to be right. That's not always true. When I was like imagining the conversation and what I thought a takeaway could be, in my view, in our experience, which is an N of 1, the governance is part of what's allowed us to move fast. But our governance is different than governance across other enterprise risks, right? It's integrated across teams. It's iterative. It changes constantly, and that's not really the sort of static ERM program that you're used to across like the rest of your enterprise risks. But I think it's why we've been able to move as fast as we have. But I don't know if that's true in other places. And, Moderna is like pharma. It's like a highly regulated, place where you could imagine maybe a different approach than, we're building a clause builder product with AI. It's like there are different risks, right? So, but I think that turned out to be right. And that's one of the takeaways, that getting governance right, and we'll talk about that for a second because that's my next takeaway, is really critical to success. And that you heard that from Anna, who sees it across enterprises, and Henry, who is like in the middle of, I think, one of the most successful like enterprise-wide adoptions in this highly regulated industry. So that's takeaway number 1.
And just to reflect on that, what you said before, that governance is not kind of this like side issue, but if you sort of view it as a key part of adoption, understanding that the biggest issue that people have is trust. We've spoken before on this podcast about, elevator technology working for 10 years until someone until the Otis
experiment.
Until the ability to like, break. And I think that trust level is so key with new technologies that can cause a bit of anxiety that feel, kind of like frightfully new. And I thought that was a really like interesting point. I think, Anna specifically made the point that you don't want to over govern, or you don't want to be you don't want to risk non-adoption, because she said if you sort of compare the risk of adopting AI, which is one thing, to the risk of non-adopting, the risk of non-adoption can be existential, because your competitors are moving, the market is moving, the world is changing. Non-adoption is not an option, right?
So that was the second takeaway for me, was how, and obviously it's something that's been true for me. It's been my view in the business I'm in for a long time now, but we heard that clearly, I think, from every panelist. Anna and Henry in particular said it, quite loudly. In some ways, Galia's, job is, more. It's really, really important, but it's pretty narrow. She's focused on the governance of the actual models that the rest of us are now governing in our, building of products on top of them. But Anna and Henry both said that. They both said, it's kind of, I always put it as opposed to what? Like you could, there's always going to be like, you're a lawyer. You can always like think of a way to get like slightly more comfortable if you do like yet another set of tests, or wait a little longer, or, send it to another committee. But the risk of not moving is more significant than moving. And hearing that from lawyers in particular is actually still not super common, right? I mean, you and I talked to probably more lawyers with that view than most people, but I also talked to like lots of other lawyers, and I think there's still a lot of reservation about risk with this particular technology because of some things that are different about it than previous technologies. But that was takeaway too.
But it makes you wonder, especially because you talked about the example of Moderna and the fact that they started adoption with legal, and maybe that's the recipe. I mean, maybe the recipe for correct adoption is to start with the people who might be the first to shut down AI in the organization because they're typically the folks that have to focus on risk.
Right.
So by starting there, it's like, well, let's build trust where it might be the most difficult, and then empower those people to let others in the organization trust the AI. And I think that this is, one of the things that I've seen in legal departments is a lot of the folks who are, looking at AI tools maybe in 2024, and that was like their mandate. If you compare now in 2026, they're actively involved in creating governance policies and guardrails for various agents being rolled out across their organization. But now, again, having listened to the panel yesterday, my takeaway was maybe Moderna specifically got it right by starting in legal.
Yeah. I mean, I have to assume that was part of why they started there. I mean, I don't know if – I mean, in large part, you start with the team that's most likely to say this is too risky. Then your chances of success go up significantly.
Right.
At the same time, you get that team thinking about what are the guardrails that we're going to want to put around, every other team that adopts this technology. And they get a real head start on that instead of feeling like they're playing catch up. And when lawyers feel like they're playing catch up, they always say, no, don't do it. Like that's just our first go-to. It's kind of what we were taught in law school, right? And so I think they were put in a position of let's figure out how to say yes. And they were able to do that from the beginning. So that was my second takeaway. My third, because you said I had
2 to 3.
My third is agents are making governance like a do-over almost. I mean, not a do-over, but it's like having us it's requiring us to think again about what governance will look like in a world where agents are doing things autonomously. And I thought Anna's take on thinking about, and Galia addressed this as well, not every agent is one you have to worry about with the same precision, right? Some of them are, looking across your own internal, documents for a particular outcome, and that's not as risky as a product you're building that people are using, or in Moderna's case, even more so, right? A product that, may result in life or death, where if agents are making decisions, you're going to need to figure out what your governance looks like. But the
as opposed to reviewing an NDA,
exactly,
not the same risk factor,
right? Exactly. And lawyers aren't always good about that. But our agentic future, where we all have agents on our teams, where we're employing agents to do to conduct commerce for us, to conduct other business for us. We're going to have to figure out what's the right governance structure for each one of those different kinds of agents, right? And the human in the loop, which has been the that's the fallback for every governance talking point. And we have a human in the loop. That falls apart when you have agents at scale negotiating agreements 24 hours a day, and they never get hungry and they never get tired. You're not going to have a human in the loop. Just means that doesn't work, right? So you're going to have to figure out new approaches.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned this because I first of all, AI is moving really fast, and I think there are a lot of people who are kind of coming around to the adoption now and are coming in meaningful adoption. But in some ways, they're still being given the kind of governance frameworks and mental models of 2 and 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So you and I discussed this in the podcast with Jen Leonard that we did recently, that AI draft me my email might have been a really good use case in 2023 and 2024 when you're trying to learn about where could I use AI? How might that be? Today, I don't think I'm drafting very many emails using AI. If anything, my emails have now become like a little bit more human, a little bit, less AI-ified. And I think in the same way, if you look at like Human in the Loop was built for a technology that we could all see pretty much right away as like phenomenal, but deeply incomplete. We saw that with the immediate things with like fake citations and hallucinations. But I think if you're still like if your entire governance model 3 years later is Human in the Loop, you're talking about a framework that is kind of not relevant anymore, especially with you consider not just how much impact agents can have, which was a big part of the discussion yesterday, because like the greater the impact, you think, okay, maybe even the greater the risk. On the other hand, because part of what an agentic structure does is actually make the model better, it in some cases like you don't necessarily need some of the same like governance structures that you would have used, right? If like if when you press the calculator 2 + 2 = 4, then you don't need the human
You
in
don't
the
need
loop
a human
anymore.
making sure that 4 is like 2 + 2, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So when the thing works, it also changes the governance structure, and like some governance needs to probably be like more robust today, and in some cases we probably ought to pull back and say like, no, you can trust that. That's pretty good.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I mean, I do think there's like a lot none of us have fully wrapped our minds around yet about what this agentic future looks like. Not only, as you know, I'm thinking about this in terms of the dispute resolution layer, like when we have, millions of agents, negotiating and executing contracts. What happens when there's a dispute between the agents? It's a totally different it's a different set of stakeholders that are involved in the dispute. There are probably different disputes that can be resolved with, different processes. And I don't think anybody's thinking about that quite yet. But there's going to be a, really interesting set of governance questions around that. So I don't know.
And I think the mindset is such an important feature as well, because I think, one of the things that I've seen is that early adoption is not just about like knowing how to use AI, but it really is wrapping your mind around AI. And I think this is underappreciated. When you begin to really wrap your mind around AI, you start to understand it, but you also kind of start to see like the ... Like, okay, so like, where does this leading us? Like, and now that we have 3 years and we can see like how much has happened in 3 years, that's becoming like a very real question of like, okay, so like now what does this mean? Galia specifically mentioned, I thought it was interesting because, she's in child safety at OpenAI, like the most sensitive area. And I could have easily seen her coming in and saying, hey, you need to be really, really careful. Her message to lawyers was like, if you have like not sunk your teeth into this yet, like do not
go
be
home
waiting.
Right now
go
and
home right now and do it. And I thought that's one thing. It's one thing to like hear Sam Altman say that, but for the person who's dealing with some of the riskiest and most sensitive issues at OpenAI, to hear her say that, I thought was also like a really interesting point.
Yeah, she was pretty clear-eyed about that. But I think she's responsible for some pretty important safety work at OpenAI, maybe the most important as far as I know. But she also, has a first eye view of the like power of the technology to, make legal work better, frankly. So I get it. I mean,
I wanted to just highlight one other point because I was, making a lot of notes during the panel. There was one point that really stuck out to me, and I think it's something that the AAA has done really effectively. And I think it's crazy, by the way, that we're 3 years out. And I do think that the AAA has one of the best like operating playbooks for general adoption in an organization, 100-year-old organization. We just celebrated the centennial, so it's really, really exciting. But you've done a fantastic job as an organization of creating a real AI culture. And one of the things that Henry, correct?
Henry Hagan.
Hagan from Moderna suggested was this idea of what he called a GACT,
Yeah.
a generative AI champions team, which is about 10 to 15% of the organization
Yep.
who are really leaning in hard. And I think if you like in the AAA, it's more than that. But
Yeah.
I've seen this from talking to like case managers
Yeah.
who are vibe coding solutions
Oh, yeah.
today. Like there's really like a not just a top down, but also a bottom up culture of adoption that I think is really not just exciting and significant, but also like a key part of adoption. When people sort of
100%,
realize that, oh my
yeah.
gosh, like this is not like the old days of a single, developer at the top of the organization, and anything we want developed has to go through them. And there's a long sort of laundry list, and I'll get to your project when I get to it. Like today, the power is really in the hands of anyone in the organization who sort of like chooses to go in that direction.
Janet Miranda showed me yesterday an app she vibe coded on Base 44 over the weekend to help her with more quickly capturing leads at Legalweek. Like she literally built an app on Base 44 over the weekend. Like that's what people at AAA are doing. That's what they've been kind of empowered to do. But I agree with Henry's take on the champions is kind of I don't think we call them that. I always think I think of them as our lab. But as you know, I believe there's like sort of three pieces, and hat tip to Ethan Malik for putting names around them. But I think your organization has to have leadership commitment. If your C-suite isn't like 100% bought in, I think you're going to stall. Your C-suite has to be using the technology to be able to understand where it's going. I think there's just no way around that. I also think then you have to, enable the crowd to use it, and that means everybody across your organization. They won't all be champions, but the only way you find your champions is by giving your crowd permission and not only permission, but like some training and encouragement in the form of however you encourage your employees to do things.
Right.
And then you find your lab, you find your champions, and you never know where they're going to come from. There'll be a case manager who figures out like all the different ways this can make case management better, not only for case managers but even for users of your system. And you'll find somebody in marketing who figures out that you can do things you never could do before, and they become your champions, and then you can have them go sit with people who are having a harder time figuring out how the technology changes what they do. And it's a game changer. So it's definitely our playbook.
So I have to say this is what you said maybe sounds like simple for people who are listening to this, but I hope they pay deep attention because that order is also critical.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't convince like your senior team and get them on board, you're going to stall. So before you try to diffuse the technology throughout the organization, time has to be spent with the leaders.
Yep.
And if they're not seeing the eureka moment, you got to like keep showing them.
Yeah.
It's not a one-time conversation. I think a lot of people think, oh, we had our we had our C-suite training, or we did that. And I think that there's a lot of persuasion that goes into it. And then giving the technology to everybody, not just sort of saying, oh, you're going to be the champion or you're going to be the champion, but empowering everyone and then seeing like who emerges as the champions. And you said another thing that I've now seen at so many orgs, and I have to like continue now counseling other clients along these same lines, which is it's not necessarily the people that you expect.
Nope.
Right. Sometimes it is, but sometimes the people who are getting involved in building tools and taking advantage and not just trying to like automate what they do, but like, wait, how can I
seeing the potential?
How can I become a Superman? Like, how can I do something that I never did?
Now I can do someone else's job in addition to my job.
And you can't assume just because someone has not necessarily taken initiative in your organization before,
right,
this might be their moment. I think you see sometimes like it really comes from places that you wouldn't expect.
100%. I mean, yeah.
Moving beyond the panel, what are some of your early takeaways from Legalweek itself? This is the first year at the Javits Center, so it feels different.
Feels different. I mean, I like the Javits Center better. I don't know about you.
A lot.
Yeah. It's like we're not all like, first of all, I'm not lost all the time. I could never figure out where I was in the Hilton. I literally I don't know. I couldn't get to the same place twice. Someone had to always like show me. But it feels like it feels like we've grown up. Like legal tech has grown up a lot.
Big time.
It was, the exhibit floor I thought was, way easier to get around and see what's happening and see who's where. And then the rooms for presentations were better. I thought everything about it was better.
It's like the user experience of AI being better has like also extended to the in-person events.
To the in-person events,
right? It didn't feel like the kind of like crowded throng that it always felt like in the Hilton.
Less jankety. It's less jankety. Whenever anything gets less jankety, I like it better.
Yeah. Now, what was interesting was the folks you had on the panel. Let's go back to that. None of them talked about using legal specific applications.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah, it's fascinating, right?
So like at Moderna, the partnership was with OpenAI. Anna didn't talk about this at Freshfields, but their primary partner in AI has been Google.
Yeah.
Right. So they're unique in that respect. And obviously Galia at OpenAI, but even at the AAA, you have built the AI arbitrator and resolution simulator also like on the foundation models.
Yeah.
And you've built that, bespoke. So I think my question in looking at the exhibit floor, and maybe this is too simple a narrative, but in 5 years from now,
who's still going to be there?
Who's still there, will the conference
or is it just
be
one big Claude booth?
One big Claude booth, exactly.
There's like Gemini and Claude and OpenAI, and that's it. Yeah. Right.
So how are you thinking about this right now? And again, I know it's impossible to predict the future on this.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously from where we sit, like what we're building, we alone have the expertise and the data to build the tools that make dispute resolution better.
Right.
And so building on top of the foundation models is a no-brainer. There's nothing that another layer on top of the foundation layer would give us that would help us build better.
There isn't a tool out there called RB.
No, I don't know RV yet, but or RB. Yeah, either way. Yeah. But we need to be RB. Like that's us, right? But we're a little bit different. We're not a law firm. So law firms I know are sometimes need some comfort level with another vendor having like built the guardrails and the UI. UX for them, and that makes it easier for adoption and easier conversations around risk. And
maybe it feels fancier also, which
I think so.
Is part of the culture.
A couple of them are, I think, doing a pretty good job getting into the fancy market. So I don't know what that looks like in 5 years because everybody read the viral like X post from Shapiro, the lawyer who. The Claude law firm guy.
Oh, Zach Shapiro, yeah.
Zach Shapiro. I'm sorry, I should have known. How did I not remember? But I mean, he's a real guy, like running a real practice with Claude. And it's, unbelievably successful and easy, right? So there's going to be more of those and more smaller practices like his. Where lawyers say, I'm not sure I need anything other than the frontier model. And so it feels like the Wild West for legal businesses, like what they might buy. On the other hand, you and I have talked about the startups building bespoke, platforms, processes, services for legal businesses who have never had any love from legal tech, right?
Right.
And that feels like there's a there to me, because there are definitely, pockets of legal where lawyers definitely still have files in file cabinets and they like have long paper. I mean, so they have like a longer way to go. Like they're not going to start using Claude to build, the tools to fix their criminal defense practice or their, immigration practice or you name it.
A few years ago, I was staying in downtown LA, and I was right near the courthouse. And in my hotel was basically like a litigation war room for like multiple firms. Yeah. And I remember every night seeing the same person coming in with his big accordion folder, and I was just like, that is like that's the AI that's being used right now by the litigators. Like that,
Yeah.
this in some sense it is for sure like definitely like very old school, and in
Yeah.
certain respects, I think it remains kind of like an old school business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's not a surprise that there's so much capital interest in legal businesses right now, right?
Right.
Like, and like the confluence of what technology is enabling, and a little bit of like regulatory cracks, I think, means no surprise that capital is finding its way to legal businesses. So I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of AI tech for lawyers. I don't know. I can't wait to see. Like, if we walk the floor in 10 years, who's still going to be there? Or who are the new people that are going to be there? Will it just be, Dario and Sam Altman? That's it? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I started noticing really earlier this year is we're getting a lot more companies that are focusing on AI for litigation. And I don't mean just in the discovery sense, that's where it's always been. Oh, you're an e-discovery company, right? And for years, the joke about the legal tech show, and then eventually when they changed the name to Legalweek, was that it should just be called the e-discovery show because it was just all the major e-discovery providers, service and the tech. And these new tools are not focused on discovery, but really on litigation, storytelling, and strategy. And the reason I flag that is because I think one of the things that maybe we're seeing a shift in is the first use case for AI was contracts. Right? That's where everyone just kind of went with their brain because they're like, oh, we've tried to sort of automate that over the last 5 years, and I don't know how well it works, but like maybe now with this new better AI, we can do that.
Yeah.
But contracts, in a way, not just kind of like a boring use case, but it's also not necessarily taking full advantage of what a language model can do because a large language model is
much more creative,
deeply creative.
Yep, totally.
And that's and I think this is again where I hope people like frame is shifting a little bit instead of just thinking about, oh, I use AI to do the sort of mundane, boring tasks so that I can focus on like the high level strategic work. Have you ever thought about maybe using the AI to help you with something the high level strategic work? And so I think the move into litigation is also like very much like a AI 2.0 and is a real like sort of sign of maturity. Obviously, like you've thought about like AI in the context of dispute resolution and in disputes long before a lot of these companies have emerged. But I think now it's like we're starting to see a meeting of the minds, and I think more people over the coming year, more litigators are going to start taking advantage of these tools because it's really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, there are businesses, lawyers have like dispute portfolios, and there are some disputes for which like really high-end AI tools, storytelling, could be a game changer. There are lots of others where I think all you want is like the AI arbitration tools we're building to get them resolved in a like just significantly more efficient way. So I think everybody's going to be able to start thinking about their disputes across a portfolio and be like, which ones need the, high-end creative strategic tools to take a $50 million case and make it a $500 million case, and which are, better funneled into let's get these resolved in 30 days. Yeah.
So I want to ask you before we conclude about the recent launch of Resolution Simulator, which is, I think, a very important part of the AI arbitrator, which you've released. I have my own thoughts about it from observing it, but I want to first let you explain to the audience, what this is and where it kind of came from.
The resolution simulator we're pretty excited about. It actually didn't take a lot of work because it's built on the AI arbitrators platform, and we took a lot of care and time to build that in an agile way over 10 months. And it's really a bunch of agents who operate across the dispute resolution process. But the resolution simulator is really a direct response to what we were hearing from the market, which was, can we take the AI arbitrator into our own environment and just figure out like the value of our case? So we know at the front end, is this a case we want to put a bunch of time and money into, or is this one we probably can move, more quickly towards some kind of settlement? And we heard enough of that we were like, sure, that's actually not that hard for us to build given what we already built. And now parties are going to be able to do that. So we just wanted to be able to say yes to people.
And I think it's such a game changer for a few reasons. Number one, it gets past the point of how can AI automate the things that we already do, and begins to get you into the world of what would I not have even thought of doing once upon a time, but now that I have AI, we can do that. So if there is an AI arbitrator, by definition now there is a way of like doing that simulation.
Right. And
it's one thing to say, okay, well, here's our sort of evaluation of your case, and here's why we think it's strong or not. And the incentive of a lawyer might not be the same incentive of a client when it comes to resolving a dispute.
Absolutely.
And now there's both a way, if the client or the lawyer might be being unreasonable, to have a little bit of data and evidence on like, how is this going to be decided? And I think that, it's running a simulation once. I think I might want to run simulations of this like 100 or 1,000 times to see like, hey, listen, I know you think the case is so strong, but why is this coming out with us not getting our way 90% of the time? And maybe we ought to reconsider that. And to me, it's like such a game changer. I think the other thing is, the AI the arbitrator requires the consent of two parties.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's new. There's not been anything like this, in history.
Right.
So for both parties to agree to
get
it,
comfortable, they need to see how well it works.
They need to like be able to see how it works.
Totally.
And I think this gives that perspective to the point of like, that simulation that we saw, that was pretty great. Like, why aren't we just considering this like as the way to resolve this dispute?
Right.
This doesn't need a human arbitrator. This should be a quick in and out.
It significantly reduces the information asymmetry that I love lawyers. Some of my best friends are lawyers, but that lawyers have put a little bit of a wedge in between them and the public they serve for a long time. And I think ultimately that's to the benefit of everyone. It's clearly to the benefit of the public to have better information earlier about what the options are for disputes that they're dealing with. And ultimately better for lawyers as well, because there's like an enormous like market that is underserved with that now we have technology to build business models that will allow them to serve it more happily, more satisfying careers. So it's all good. I think we have a little bit of we have to work through some things over the next few years, but I think at the end of it, it's good news for everybody.
Bridget, I look forward to getting together again at Legal Week next year and seeing how far things have come.
Can't wait.
But this has been really fun.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the AAAi Podcast. Please consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite podcasting platform. And don't forget to follow and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.